Chris. Welcome back. Another episode of the Equity Accelerator podcast where you and I, sometimes we just expound on things about running a mortgage business, running a real estate business, owning real estate, problems in our lives, triumphs.
Yeah.
You know, it's just as our forum to have fun, but I really am trying, the main focus for the podcast, if you're a first-time listener, is to, I'm trying to provide extra value to my real estate partners, the real estate community of Portland, Oregon, which is where I run my mortgage business. And today I'm super excited. We're joined by Melissa Wright, who I met through a friend who does property management for Airbnb, a company called Descansa. Maybe we should have them on to talk about their service as well. But they had an open house on one of their properties, and Melissa was there, and she's a critical partner for Descansa's property management operation because they get hired to run Airbnb and be an Airbnb host for people who don't have time or inclination to do it properly. And the first thing that they say is, are you permitted? And Melissa runs an operation. Do you have a name for your company? We have STR Permits, strpermit.com is your website, and it's short-term rental permit. So there's some complications and some things to really be aware of if you're thinking of doing Airbnb, or specifically if you're thinking of buying a property for the purposes of Airbnb. That's a thorny thicket. But I wanted you to share with us your expertise and what people should be thinking about if they're looking to get rich on the Airbnb gravy train.
Yeah. Well, there are certainly things that need to be navigated with City of Portland code around short-term rentals. And that is my area expertise, is the City of Portland Title 33 planning and zoning codes regarding short-term rentals. I have not yet ventured out into any of the other jurisdictions.
Gotcha.
I'm conquering City of Portland first, and then we'll go from there.
Good. Noted.
There's a lot to know just for City of Portland. So one of the biggest things that I hate to see happen for new home buyers is buying a property with the intention of renting out short term and then buying a property that will never get approved by City of Portland for that use.
Yeah. Ouch.
So knowing ahead of time what those rules and regulations are before you even start looking at properties seems like a very smart move.
Mm-hmm. Are there features or parts of town that are always off limits, or how do you know if something would be unpermittable or would be permittable? What's like, are there like easy points to pay attention to?
So the number one thing that everybody has to have if you're going to short-term rent in the City of Portland is a long-term tenant at the address. So that could be the homeowner, that can be a long-term renter, but there has to be someone at the address that will verify that they are indeed living there. And that verification is through an Oregon driver's license. And then notarizing a document saying that they live there.
Gotcha. So you can't have like a condo, the South Waterfront, that's just furnished and just on Airbnb with no one living there, people coming and going or what have you.
Right.
So tell me about this, because I do have a client who has a triplex. She was like, oh my God, James, I turned it into furnished short-term rental, and it's like making so much more money now. And I think she does minimum rent of 30 days.
Right. So anything over 30 days, now you're in the long-term rental territory, and those short-term rental rules no longer apply. So
that's a key concept. If you say, well, you have to do it, it's a 30-day minimum, then you don't have to have a long-term person there. Is that correct? Correct.
Then you just are into whatever the regulations are for long-term renting.
Okay.
But what about, James, on your same example though? So Melissa, if I have a four unit or less multifamily and I live in one of the units, does that count as me being a long-term tenant?
Typically every unit has a different address. And so that's kind of how I like to explain it, that even though it's the same building, if it's a different address, it's a different deal.
Got it.
So
Gotcha. So,
every address has to have a
Wow.
long-term tenant.
So if you have an ADU, if you have like, I have this house and then I have this cool converted like studio space that's separate, just like that's a free for all. That's like, you can do short-term rentals.
Yeah, and that's usually
That's
what
kinda
people
interesting.
that do want to rent more rooms. That's kind of an ideal situation to have, and the maximum number of rooms that you can rent is 5. So if you had a 5-bedroom home with a separate ADU for your long-term tenant, that's the money right there.
Okay,
So
I see what you're
you would be
saying.
in the ADU and you could rent out the rooms in the house. Interesting.
Correct. Yeah. So the real Airbnb investors are going that route, where the ADU is either in a separate like converted garage or converted basement space, and that's where the long-term tenant is living. They're the ones that are on site. If there's any issues that should come up with the rental, keeping an eye on the garbage, keeping an eye on that sort of thing, making sure all the neighbors are happy. But then they can rent up to 5 rooms on the rest of the property.
I've noticed a lot of the east side, like infill new construction, the really modern kind of boxy, like architecturally swanky, high-end properties have like a basement ADU almost always now. And I think maybe it's for that reason, and they can charge a real premium for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Melissa, I like using Airbnb when I travel, and I always will go click on the button that says entire place. Like I want to rent the entire place. I don't want to have a private room, or I don't want to be in somebody else's space. Are you saying that that's not like, if I went to Airbnb for Portland, that I couldn't actually find something that said entire place?
Well, if the long-term tenant was in an ADU, then there is a separation between.
Got it.
So then that would still, you would still be
yeah.
able to list the rest of it as the entire place.
Got it.
So what if,
Yeah, good point.
I mean, do you think the long-term, what if like the homeowner and the long-term tenant are in kind of cahoots together? Because Airbnb, if you get the entire place, you're renting it from the homeowner. They're just like, oh, I'm out of town these 2 weeks. The house is just empty. You can come and stay here for these 2 weeks. I'll just rent it out while I'm out.
Well, that's a good idea. Can you do that?
So the long-term tenant, whether that is the homeowner or a tenant,
Right.
The resident, we'll say, can be away from the property for 90 days out of the year.
Okay.
Out of the year.
So that is the city of Portland's rule around that.
Gotcha.
I have no idea how they check how many days that you've been gone, but I think it's more of just a general idea that you've got 90 days that you can be away from the property, and you can rent that 365 days a year.
Got it.
Okay. So if they're in the ADU, you can rent the other house, but let's say that you have a 5-bedroom house and you have one tenant that's the long-term tenant and you're renting out the other bedrooms. You can just do that 365 days a year for the other bedrooms. But if someone wanted the whole house, that tenant could
vacate,
could vacate for up to 90 days of the 365 days.
So then with that, you would just want to, the rule is that bedroom that the long-term tenant would have to be included in the inspection and noted that may sometimes be a short-term rental room. Because each room that is rented short-term needs to be inspected by the city, needs to have interconnected smoke detectors and proper egress.
It's like an uphill battle. Like, I'm so glad that you are somebody who would like go figure all this out, because I would never sit down and take the patience to go through all of this stuff.
Well, that's how I got into this, is I did have to figure it out. I did one of the big complicated permits myself, and I was just blown away at the confusion, the lack of information, the lack of guidance, and I just saw how confusing the bureaucratic process can be.
Let's talk about that, because there are 2 levels of permitting. One is like the basic, and one's like the deluxe, which is 1,000% more complicated than the basic. Yes. There's a huge separation between the 2.
Yes.
Break that down for us, please.
So there, like you said, there are 2 permits. So there's a type A, ASTR, accessory short-term rental permit, and there's a type B. The type B is a land use review. The type A is a home occupation permit. So I'll go over the type A first.
Okay.
Type A, home occupation permit, you can rent up to 2 bedrooms in your home. So if you wanted to rent a total of 2 bedrooms, you would need to have a 3-bedroom home because you have to have 1 room for that long-term tenant.
Okay.
Or 2-bedroom home with an ADU, some
Gotcha.
combination of that.
Mm-hmm.
You can have up to 5 guests at a time with that permit. That permit is just a couple of documents to fill out. You send out a notice to all the neighbors surrounding the home, contact the neighborhood association, neighborhood coalition, and it's $196 to the city of Portland, which is a inspection fee. An inspector comes out, looks at your rooms, signs off that you have those interconnected smoke detectors and proper egress windows, and you get your permit. It's pretty straightforward. There's not really any issues as long as you can prove you have a long-term tenant, and you just follow the steps.
And and is there like an annual re-inspection fee or anything like that?
You need to renew it every 2 years and then have it re-inspected every 4 years.
Cool.
I believe.
Easy.
Yeah. So yes, it's all the forms are online, and I'm always very transparent when people come to me looking for that information. I send them the forms, I tell them how to do that, and if they want to hire me to fill it out for them, they can do that as well. So, but people don't like paperwork, and I'm happy to do it. Because anytime dealing with city it can be really scary. It can be really intimidating and scary. So, but that's a home occupation permit, which also means that you can't have you can't have a hair salon, you can't be a piano teacher and have students coming and going. So you can only have 1 business at a time in your home.
Oh, okay.
So something else to think about.
Yeah, no kidding.
The type B ASTR permit, or also known as, it's a type 2 land use review. So the difference with the land use review is we're now changing the usage permanently for that address, permanently as long as everything stays the same in compliance. So
you're changing the zoning?
Not changing the zoning, you're changing the use.
Okay.
Because of that, there's a lot more requirements. You need to get a traffic impact study, because now we need to know how many cars are coming and going, and who's going to be parking on the street, and can the city handle that? Parks and Recreation are going to weigh in. The Water Bureau is going to weigh in. Can that address handle the excess water usage? Everybody's in the city is going to weigh in on this. So it's a major process.
It's literally turning your home into a hotel, like a professional hotel.
Right. Or more like it's it's built on the idea of a bed and breakfast.
Wow.
Okay.
So, but we don't really have those anymore. A little bit. Wow. So it takes about 6 months to go through the process. The fee to City of Portland for that is around $5,000. A traffic impact study is around $3,000. You're going to need architectural drawings of the home, everything that you would need for a land use review. And much, much more.
How unique is that? Is Portland is it the same in San Francisco and Seattle? Or they have similar kind of?
Most major cities have these complexities, and I don't know, that Portland separates these 2-bedroom properties versus up to 5-bedroom properties, because they're really seeing the difference between it being just a home occupation, like if you're a piano teacher just making a little money, versus running a bed and breakfast.
Right.
So,
wow. I'm curious on the penalties of this, because I've got to imagine there's a lot of people who don't follow rules, don't like rules, so they're just sitting there throwing their place on Airbnb. Do they police this? Does Portland police it? What happens if you get caught? Do you know any of that?
I do. A lot of it is imminently changing. So up until this point, it's been complaint based. So if a neighbor calls the city and says, "Hey, I think my neighbor's operating an Airbnb illegally," then the city would look into it. The first fine is $1,000, which has to be paid within 15 days of when the city mails it. So, and if that doesn't happen, then it goes up to $3,000 and then up to $5,000.
Wow.
So, but so far it's only been complaint based. The city has had no way to know who's operating, because only Airbnb knows who the hosts are. So there's been a big lawsuit between the city of Portland and Airbnb and HomeAway. HomeAway is the other big short-term rental company, and they have
it's the Bing to Airbnb's Google.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So the city of Portland's been in a lawsuit with them for a long time, and it's finally coming to fruition. And what the result is that these platforms will either have to kick off anyone who does not have the permit, or they can create a pass-through registration system. So Airbnb has the option to create a permitting registration through their website. So someone would be able to self-certify that they have all the elements in place. And then I believe that it'll be random inspections at that point.
Whoa.
But that's going down September 30th.
Okay.
So anybody that doesn't have a permit is going to be removed from the listing sites, which is going to create.
That's going to be like, you're going to have to brace yourself for people are going to need to get certified right away. You're going to have a backlog.
Yes, I'm ready.
That's awesome.
I'm ready to help.
So isn't there, so on this class, the B type permitting, isn't there a limited, I read somewhere that only like the city's only allowing 150 houses to have isn't there like a limited supply of that type of permits?
So
waiting list?
I have definitely tried to get out of the city planners if there's a definitive number on that, and they're not going to give it to me. I don't think they actually have a number.
Sure.
But part of deciding whether, like when I look at a property, before I even start working with the client, there's certain due diligence that I do to make sure that it even has the potential to get the permit. And one of the things I look at is how close are the other type B properties to yours. If there's one right next door, it's a kind of a slim chance that they're going to award you a permit. If there's one 2 blocks away, it's probably fine. So, but that's just vague. And that is kind of up to the planner's discretion. Each planner can interpret the code however they choose within certain parameters. Of course, they all agree on certain things, but there's no definitive within the code that states that 2 type B ASTRs cannot be within a certain number of feet from each other.
Wow. It's like the Wild West is getting tamed a little bit.
Yeah.
God, Melissa, what do you think of, have you seen this new television show on, I don't know if it's CNBC or if it's on HGTV called Cash Pad?
No.
Have you heard of this?
No. What is it?
Oh my God, you're going to hate it so much. It's basically just like beautiful people in cool cities that are like, we have this old like crappy tool shed that's termite infested, and these people come in and like turn it into the most glamorous Airbnb rental pad. And they're like, now you're going to make $500 a day. And everyone's just like hugging and so happy. It's such a farce. I look at it, I'm like, none of this is so bad for just the imaginations of our marketplace.
And at $196 to rent 2 of your rooms, and that they're only asking for interconnected smoke detectors and only asking that your windows work if a fire happens. I think that that's totally reasonable. And I want our tourists to come and be safe when they stay here. And I would hate to see something horrible happen to our guests. And,
one of the things that I've noticed in the Portland real estate market is that people, when they're shopping for a home, are sometimes saying, I want to buy a house with an ADU or ADU potential, or if it has an ADU already. And I have seen that homes that have ADUs are one of the most surefire ways to win as a buyer. Like, you cannot overpay practically for like the market won't allow you to overpay. You always get, you get more. The market hasn't been able to properly evaluate the true value of short-term rental income on a separate studio unit, or being able to live in the studio and rent out the whole house. It's so valuable. And from a mortgage underwriting standpoint, if we see a home with an ADU, we classify that as a single family residence, and the ADU is not for income. Like the appraisal process and the underwriting process is just like, oh, this is just extra square footage that has an extra bathroom or a little kitchenette or something. Like that's not another unit, but you can turn that into $200 a night for 365 days a year. You can turn it into a cash pad. It's real. It's real. And I wonder, there will be a time when the appraisal process and the mortgage underwriting process will be able to properly account for the value of that. And I think once that happens, you'll see the value of those houses spike.
And with those, that type B permit, that land use, because it's then with the land, you can sell that as an asset. Like this is now able to, the next buyer can run an Airbnb, and that permitting is done. They can just come right in and continue running their short-term rental on that property because of all of that work has already been done.
That's killer. Well, obviously you're a huge believer in the value of short-term rentals. I am too. I've seen it in the marketplace. I know that if you have a nice room to rent and you have a good rep on Airbnb, it'll, like my neighbor he turned his very small tool shed into a studio. It's a nice, single bedroom with a little bathroom and a skylight. It's really tiny. But I asked him, I said, well, if you made it available for 365 days a year, like how many days would it be rented? And he said, probably 360. Like I couldn't believe like how it's just like never vacant. Basically, it's always rented if he wants it. He turned his tool shed and it makes $150 a night. So he turned his tool shed into $40,000 a year income.
Yeah. And with all these changes, this September 30th date coming down, and now there's going to be, when I go on Airbnb and I look for a 3+ bedroom home, there's almost 400 listings in Portland for these larger homes for rent. Wow. And when I go on the City of Portland's data of who has permits, there's only about 30. So
there it is.
Storms are coming.
The wide open market for people that are ready to do this.
Yeah.
Well, Melissa, that's so if you are listening to this and you are intrigued or excited about getting in the game on short-term rentals, Melissa, you got to talk to Melissa and engage her, get educated on how to do it right, how to avoid paying fines, and like you said, how to make sure you're keeping you're insurable and making sure that you're keeping people safe. And how do people get a hold of you? We mentioned it before, but let's close it out with
so on my website, STR Permit, singular, strpermit.com. If you go to the Connect tab, I offer a free 20-minute phone conversation. There's a scheduler right there.
Perfect.
And you can pick whatever time works for you and get me on the phone, and we can talk about all the things that you want to talk about for your property. And 20 minutes is always enough time, I promise. And we'll go over everything, and it's a free consultation just to find out what your options are.
Awesome.
That's strpermit.com.
Well, you got nothing to lose. You should definitely do that if you're thinking about getting into investing and having a short-term rental component. And of course, if you're investing in real estate, I'd love to talk to you as well. Melissa, I have the same problem with my website. It's pdxhomeloan.com. No S on the end. It's just singular. And so pdxhomeloan.com, you can email me at james@pdxhomeloan. And if you go to the website, there's phone numbers there. You can reach out. And thank you so much for spending time with us today, Melissa.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
really
great to meet you, Melissa. James, thank you, sir. Until next time, take care.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.